welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined by Lee Brown, Managing Director of the Grosvenor Group. Hello, Lee.
Good afternoon, Kate.
Good to speak to you again.
Yeah.
Lee, we're going to be talking about the road to zero, but before we kick off, could I ask you just to give me a very quick overview of the ozone service?
Yeah, I can, of course. So the ozone team were formed 5 years ago now as really a consultancy service, if you like, to help customers introduce, a low emission plug-in hybrid and the occasional battery electric vehicle as it was back then. I guess it was recognised slightly further down the line that it's not just a case of putting a Nissan Leaf on your fleet. There was increased demand, and recognition that there are other considerations around charging infrastructure, expense claims, not putting the wrong drivers into the vehicles and so on. So I guess the proposition has grown and it's more encompassing, and we've now formalised our processes and strategies aimed at those areas. We look at it from not only the financial perspective but operational, the environmental aspects as well. So yeah, the team's grown fourfold in that time, and it will only continue to grow as we help more and more customers transition to an ultra low or zero emission fleet.
Until by 2030, and then the whole company will be the ozone team.
Yeah. Well, hopefully by then everyone in the country will know how electric vehicles work and what it means from a financial, environmental and operational perspective.
And a lot of people will be on their second, third or maybe even fourth EV.
Yeah.
We, as many people will be aware, last week the government unveiled the electric vehicle infrastructure strategy, which is titled Taking Charge. So let's have a little chat about that. So we used to talk about range anxiety, and some people are now saying that charge anxiety is the thing, where a fear of the fragmented nature of the public charging infrastructure and the reliability. So what are the problems of the public charging network currently, and how do you think they can be improved?
Yeah, firstly, I completely agree with that. I prefer the phrase charge anxiety to range anxiety. I think it has been replaced. It's great to see the government, pledging, a further 1.6 billion into the improvement of the infrastructure. Now, I know it's not necessarily, bunging charge points into, retail sites and supermarkets. But I think it's the right thing to do, because by investing in the infrastructure to support, the private sector in introducing, more rapid charges, I think that's where the focus should be. At the moment, according to the latest SatMap stats, I think 90% of the chargers on the public network are what they class as slow or fast. Now, that's anything up to 22 kilowatts. Is classed as a fast charger, and I suspect the vast majority of that will be 7 kilowatts anyway, because they're still classed as fast chargers. So yeah, for me, I wouldn't call a 7 kilowatt charger a fast charger. I think they're great, when you get to the supermarket or go to your local next store or whatever, and you want a quick top up. But when you're actually using your car for business, you're doing a lot of miles, you want to get home to your family, a 7 kilowatt charger is no use to you. So by investing that money into infrastructure improvements, hopefully that will see a dramatic increase in the number of rapid charge points available, which is what we will need in 7 or 8 years time, when we're all sort of using our electric vehicles as for our work.
So more rapid chargers, or indeed high powered chargers. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, Kate. Yeah.
Great. And when it comes to workplace charging, what should companies consider ensuring that their infrastructure is future proofed?
Over the last 5-6 years, whatever, there's been a lot of companies have installed um, you know workplace chargers, which is great. It gives employees and visitors access to charging. But the problem we're seeing now is with the increase in numbers of electric vehicles on fleets. We're seeing not enough charge points, firstly. Um, Also, the fact that they're not smart chargers. They're not actually able to record who is charging their vehicle and who is taking the charge. So to future proof, I think it's important to install firstly smart chargers, because at some point in the probably not too distant a future now, you're going to have a lot of people that will be charging their vehicles at work, going off on business journeys. And I think you need to record who's charging their vehicle at work, so that they don't then double claim and claim their 5 pence per mile. But also, I think by installing a mechanism to recharge employees for the cost of the electricity. Organisations cannot continue to pay for everybody's electricity, because why would employees charge their vehicles at home for their weekend driving, for example, if they can fill up at work on a Friday and then enjoy free travel for the weekend. So businesses can't sustain that sort of free fuel, which is what a lot of people are doing. So firstly, I think, yes, it's absolutely worth the investment in smart chargers, because you will recover that in fuel cost reclaim from employees. Secondly, I think again, due to the increasing numbers of EVs, particularly on companies' fleets, 7 kilowatt chargers aren't necessarily powerful enough. If you've got people that are primarily out on the road that come into the office, they will need to charge their vehicle more quickly. So I think it's companies need to start considering now perhaps installing faster, more powerful chargers. I know you're a fan of the 25 kilowatt charger, Kate, but I think maybe a mixed strategy now, whereby you can have some of the slower chargers for people that are based at the office all day. If they want to come in and charge their vehicle up, then great. But I think if you do have frequent visitors or particular drivers that are out on the road a lot, but nip in for a meeting, or to collect goods, materials, whatever they need, then I think it's worth now considering the installation of some faster chargers.
Yeah, I totally agree, Lee. It's not one size fits all, and it's all about the dwell time. So if you've got people who are there all day, then a 3 or probably a 7 kilowatt charger would be more than adequate. But if you've got a 1 hour meeting or a 1 hour lunch, you need to turn around, then you need something a bit more substantial.
Yeah, and like everything, it's actually just taking the time to think and consider about your employees, your drivers, your visitors. Just consider what you need and give it that due care and attention, really, before making decisions.
Yeah, and thinking ahead as well, because the amount of EVs on the fleet is only going to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's think about fleets that are just starting out on their electrification strategy. Where do you think they should begin, and how can they assess what vehicles can be swapped to electric vehicles?
Well, the first thing we discuss with our customers and companies that we work with in the Ozone team is to firstly look at the car policy and the bandings. There's still quite a surprisingly high proportion of companies that we talk to that are still operating an effective rental policy or a P11D policy or something like that, which denotes the grade limits. And of course, it's widely publicised, the savings in national insurance, the avoidance of the lease rental restriction, potential fuel costs that can be saved as well, through, the advisory fuel rates, which, we've spoken about before, whether they're enough. But that said, you're still paying 5 pence per mile for business miles for an electric vehicle versus, 12, 14 pence plus for a petrol or diesel. So of course there's fuel savings as well potentially. So the first step we would always suggest is that the company moves to some form of whole life cost. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same for everybody. From an operational perspective, companies need to consider, yes, the types of vehicles that drivers need. There's no point putting in a CO2 cap of 50 grams if you've got a lot of drivers that, we work with the company, they've got a lot of drivers that, do high mileage, they're in, rural areas of the country where the infrastructure is not great, they might go on, driving through fields, whatever, so they need a high rise, big vehicle, lots of room. There's not a great of choice in that market. So by imposing a limit that doesn't allow them to get into the right plug-in hybrid or electric vehicle, then the risk that you generate is that they may say, do you know what, I'll take the cash and I'll go and get myself, a 3-year-old diesel, that's going to be far more damaging to the environment. So I would always say that, you need to consider, your drivers, what vehicles are required in certain, demographics amongst the driver base. So yeah, that's there's lots to consider, charging infrastructure, fuel reimbursement and expenses, but that's why we have the ozone team, and that's the conversations that we have with our customers to help them introduce the right policy, not only from a pure sustainability perspective, but also to ensure that the employees do get the greenest vehicles that they can, whilst managing their role and fulfilling their duties to their employer and customers and whatever.
Perfect. So what I'm hearing is there needs to be a clear CO2 target and a policy built around that, because there's a big difference between 50 grams of CO2 per mile versus a lower target, or indeed completely net zero.
Yeah. For me, Kate, it's always incremental steps. The aim is to be net zero by 2030. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that companies should just go, right, let's take a giant leap and go, we're going to go zero emission as of Monday, because what that will do is exactly what I mentioned a moment ago. People will opt out and they will go and get themselves potentially a used diesel, an older petrol.
Yep.
For me, it's making sure that the policy makes zero and plug-in hybrid vehicles as accessible as possible, to make them as attractive to employees as possible, almost to keep them in the company car scheme. And that perhaps sounds slightly ironic coming from a leasing company, but my agenda here is not necessarily getting more cars on our book and on our fleet. It really is to facilitate the transition to ultra low and zero emission, so for me it's all about getting the car policy right and making ultra low and zero emission vehicles. That is what we're aiming for, right, to make them as accessible and attractive as possible to get more people into it.
And so far so good, because the leasing industry is doing very well with their EV targets. So
yes, yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, I can only comment on ours, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, EV order takes, it continues to grow in proportion of total orders for us, to unexpected levels. I'll be honest, Kate. I knew that we would see an increase, following the benefit in kind changes, but I don't think it's just the tax incentives. I really believe that there's a lot of momentum now with sustainability and carbon reduction. And I think people aren't only doing this as a tax break. I'd like to think so.
They're desirable cars.
Yeah,
which is great. Exactly where we needed to be and where we are. So talking about vehicle desirability, 2021 was the most successful year to date for electric vehicle new registrations, which is great news. But we are starting to see, with the semiconductor shortages and other supply chain issues, this delay in delivery of new vehicles. First of all, how is that impacting Grosvenor, and also how should fleets accommodate this in their EV strategies?
Yeah, so it's been widely publicised now. The sort of ever lengthening lead times. As you mentioned, the semiconductor issue, but I think there's actually more supply challenges ahead. With recent news, shall we say? So yes, it's impacted us. Our order bank continues to grow, which looks great, and it is great, of course. But the problem we're seeing is the vehicles at the back end aren't coming back to us because customers are extending their leases on their existing fleet. So it's a challenging time. I suppose for companies looking to strategize for this. I think it's important not to panic. I think there's perhaps more noise, slightly unfairly, for battery electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles to a degree, but that's only as a result, as the increased demand, as we mentioned. And I think that the thing we've seen is we are seeing the same lengthening lead times for a lot of combustion petrol and diesel vehicles. But I think that it's easier to find more readily available ICE combustion engine vehicles than it is battery or electric equivalents, because, as I say, the demand has been a lot higher. So I think it's important not to panic. Whatever vehicle a driver orders now, they're signing up to 3, maybe 4 years of running that vehicle. Now that's 3 or 4 years of increased pollution in the environment, 3 or 4 more years of increased benefit in kind tax, and potentially increasing benefit in kind tax as well, because I'm sure that they will continue to rise in their tax. So and fuel prices as well, as we've seen. I can only assume that they are, we will seldomly see fuel prices plummet. I know we did at the start of the pandemic, but I don't see any reason why the cost of petrol and diesel will drop. So it's important not to panic. Perhaps remain patient. Talk to your leasing provider. We've got a great team in purchasing that keep a really good handle on stock availability and lead times. And it might be that you've got a driver that's looking at a Volkswagen ID3 or something, sees that it's a 12-month plus lead time, and think, no, I'm not waiting that long. I'm going to get myself a diesel Golf or something, because I might be able to get one in 3 months. But I would say, rather than do that, why don't you look at another manufacturer but stay EV, and cut your emissions, cut your benefit in kind tax. So there's lots to consider. But yeah, I think it's important to remain focused on sustainability where you can.
I think that's great advice, and your point, which is, for the sake of being patient for maybe 6 months, you're going to get the benefit of that cleaner and more cost-effective driving. Whereas if you go backwards to an ICE vehicle now, you're going to miss out on a lot of the benefits that are around now for pure battery electric.
Another thing, employers, sorry to cross you there, Kate, but another thing we're seeing with companies is they're actually inviting drivers to order sooner than they would do normally. Now, typically, renewals are considered around 6 months before the expiry of the existing vehicle. We would normally invite the driver to order their replacement car. But we're seeing customers, lengthen that to 9 months and in some cases 12 months now. And there's opportunities to manage that with the dealers and manufacturers as well, should the vehicle come into stock sooner, because obviously the customer doesn't want termination costs on the existing vehicle. So there's things that we can do to help manage that, if drivers select vehicles that are available sooner. So, you can invite drivers to order their cars earlier. And the other thing as well, just to mention is, particularly where, drivers have access to cash, there will always be a tendency, for a driver to say, actually, yeah, do you know what, I'll come out of the company car scheme, I'll take the cash and I'll go and get myself a used car. Now, the plug-in capable vehicles in the used car market at the moment, are still few and far between, particularly the longer range electric vehicles. So there's a greater risk that they take the cash. And again, we're back to where we were a few moments ago, in them getting, potentially a petrol or diesel car. So it's remain patient. And,
which we don't want.
No.
So don't panic. Plan ahead. And speak to the Ozo team, find out what alternatives are available on the plug-in hybrid and battery electric market, if you need a vehicle sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I agree, Kate.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Lee. As always, it has been a pleasure talking to you. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you to the Grosvenor Group for joining GreenFleet Talks. And thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.
Thank you.